Shalom and welcome to 2 Minutes of Torah. This year is entitled Parshat Chayai, Part 2, regarding Rabbi Akiva's medrash that we learned in the previous year, that his students, his Talmidim, whoever were listening to him, having a tough time staying awake during Shir. And according to some commentaries, the reason they were tired, the reason he switched over to a story was not simply that they were tired as late at night, it was they were spiritually tired. It was a tough time for the Jewish people, and he sent them a message that Hashem's reward sometimes can take generations. And even though it's a down period, we need to be patient, we need to wait. The reward comes. Not always in the generation the way we'd want, but it does eventually come to Bnei Israel. That's in addition to each individual's reward that he's guaranteed after he passes away. So I'd like to just apply that to our generation. Right now, these days, it's in the end of Cheshvan, Tafshin Ayin Hey, November 2014, a bit of a tough time for the Jewish people here in Israel. Whether people officially call it intifada, they don't call it intifada. There's a lot of stuff going on around the country, a lot of attacks and Jewish deaths and stabbings. It's a downtime for us here. It's a very sad time. Every Jew that's killed, of course, it's a tragedy. And I think it's an important message for us as well, that there are ups and there are downs for the Jewish people. That's just always the way it's been. It was a down that way in Rabbi Akiva's times, and there's been so many downs 70, 80 years ago in the Holocaust. Now, in general, Baruch Hashem, it's an uptime for the Jewish people. We have Jewish sovereignty. The Jewish population is growing here. Kibbutz Galiot in gatherings in front of our eyes. But still, every death is such a tragedy and so hard on the Jewish people. Each person wonders, can I go? Can I go to Yerushalayim? Can I go out? What's going to happen? Will I be stabbed? Am I going to be run over by a car? And it's tough. But two messages, of course, that I'd like to offer. Number one, Bigadol, compared to the previous downtimes. This is certainly much, much better. That's number one. And number two, the message of Rabbi Akiva, that the reward for Klal Yisrael sometimes is immediate for the ma'asim, the good deeds that were done by our avos and previous generations, and sometimes it's not immediate. Sometimes it occurs a little bit later. We have to always take that into account. And one last point I'd like to mention is, it's not just a question of nechama that we should have, that Hashem will carry out all the proper justice somewhere down the line. It's more than that. If one looks around at the community in Israel, not just the sheer numbers of people that are here, almost 6 million people, the biggest Jewish community in the world. So soon we're going to be the rove of all the people in the Jewish world. There's more than that. There's another point in the Nechama that should be mentioned as well. One looks at the Jewish community in Israel itself. Each of the Torah worlds, we should just think back. Each community, the Baal Shem Tov started a few years ago, Hasidic dynasty. It was a few people and a few students. And a generation or 2, 3 later was also that way. And then it grew to tens and tens of thousands of people. Look at the Torah community. Let's just take one example of Rabbi Yitzchak Cohen Cook, just a few generations ago. Passed away right before Akamat Medina, 1930s. So he was one. He was a leading gadol. And then his student Tzvi Yehuda Cook, and then a few other students together, of course, with Moshe Tzvineri and others, with Tzvi Yehuda Cook. And then the third generation, they had their Talmidim, Rav Melamed, Rav Yaakov Levanon, Rav Neria, the Rav Aviner. And then those Talmidim are now Rosh Yeshiva of different yeshivas, where there's literally tens and thousands of Talmidim sitting and learning. And those Talmidim, of course, are on yeshivas. They're already setting up their own yeshivas. So the Torah world is expanding in incredible ways. And the Torah world in every community, the Hasidic community, the Yeshivish community, the Mizrahi community, the Sephardic community, it's expanding, expanding, and expanding. So when we see it's a bit down and things are tough in the Jewish people, we always have the two previous nechamot, that each individual will be rewarded at the end of his days. Communities will be rewarded, maybe not in Olam Hazeh, maybe, and certainly in Olam Haba, but maybe another generation later. It will happen, just like we gave his message. And 3, we are getting so much stronger spiritually. And that spiritual elevation, also Mietz Hashem, is going to merit its own rewards. We're not just going to simply be relying on the rewards of previous generation, but rewards of and the merits of our own very generation. Yetz Hashem, we should see that special hashgacha granted to us in the very near future, the immediate future, Yetz Hashem, based on our rewards for our own very special accomplishments in our generation. Shalom.